Her name was Helene. She was 84 years old, and she had not left the care home in 11 months. Not because her faith had grown cold, not because she had stopped wanting to. She had not left because her body had made a decision that her spirit refused to accept. And so, every morning, she woke in a room that smelled of antiseptic and someone else's flowers, and she did what she had done every morning since she was 7 years old. She prayed. On a Tuesday afternoon, in late spring, Helene sat in the chair by the window, the one that faced the small courtyard, where the roses were beginning to open, and she watched the papal audience on the small television. Her daughter had brought 3 years ago, and never taken back. The volume was turned low. The nurses moved behind her door. She watched the thousands of faces in Rome, the flags, the singing. The crowds turned toward the man in white, moving through them like a shepherd through a field. And then Pope Leo the 14th stopped walking. He stopped, and he turned toward the section of the hall where the elderly pilgrims were seated. And he said something into the microphone that made Helene reach out her hand toward the television screen, not to change the channel, not to turn up the volume. She reached out her hand, the way a person reaches toward a face they have not seen in a very long time, and she began to cry. What the Pope said in that moment, and what it unlocked in the hearts of millions of elderly men and women watching from care homes, hospital wards, and empty apartments across the world, is a story that has not yet been fully told. Because it did not begin with a speech. It did not begin in Rome. It began with a letter written on behalf of people who no longer had the strength to write for themselves. Stay with us, because by the end of this story, you will understand why an entire generation of faithful souls, men and women who built the church with their hands and their tears and their lifetimes of quiet devotion, needed to hear what this Pope said, and why, if there is someone elderly in your life right now, what you do after watching this story may matter more than you realize. Before we go further, if you believe that the forgotten members of our church deserve to be seen, heard, and brought back to the heart of the faith they gave their lives to, please subscribe to this channel right now. We exist to carry stories that strengthen belief and reconnect people to God's love. Your support helps us reach the person who needs this message most today. Subscribe, and let us continue together. To understand why that Tuesday afternoon mattered so deeply, you first have to understand something the church does not always say out loud. Across the world right now, there are millions of Catholic men and women over the age of 75 who are not in church on Sunday. Not because they chose to leave, not because their faith ran dry. They are not there because their knees will no longer carry them down the aisle, because the bus route changed and no one found a replacement, because the care home is 12 kilometers from the nearest parish and the van only goes on Tuesdays, because a fall 2 winters ago ended something quietly that no announcement was ever made about, because they are in a hospital bed, in a memory care unit, in a small room where the loudest sound on Sunday morning is the squeak of a medication trolley moving through the corridor. These people built those churches. They filled those pews for 50, 60, 70 years. They gave to the collections when money was short and faith was all they had left to give. They said yes to God when saying yes cost them something real, when the culture mocked them, when the world moved on, when their own families drifted. They prayed the rosary through decades of personal grief that this generation has never known. They carried the church through hard years and never asked to be thanked for it. And now, they sit by windows. They hold rosaries worn smooth from decades of prayer. They watch small screens. And on Sunday mornings when the bells ring somewhere out beyond the glass, some of them close their eyes and they are there. They are back in the pew. They are back in the choir loft where they sang for 40 years. They are kneeling at the altar where they were confirmed, where they received their husband or wife, where they held their children up to be baptized. They have not left the church in their hearts. The church has simply stopped coming to them. Pope Leo the 14th knew this. He knew it because of what was sitting on his desk. In the months following his election, the Pope made a quiet and deliberate habit. Alongside the formal correspondence that crossed his desk, the diplomatic documents, the theological consultations, the correspondence from heads of state, he asked that a separate collection be made available to him each week. A collection of ordinary letters. Letters from ordinary Catholics, written by hand, sent to the Vatican the way people have always sent prayers into silence, not entirely sure anyone would receive them, but sending them anyway. Among those letters came hundreds, and then thousands, from the elderly and from those who loved them. A retired schoolteacher in Poland wrote to say she had not received communion in 7 months. Her parish had no homebound ministry. She could not find her own way there anymore. She was not writing to complain, she said. She was writing because she needed to tell someone. A man in his 90s in the Philippines dictated a letter to his granddaughter and asked her to write his words exactly as he spoke them. He said, "Holy Father, I am not complaining. God has been very good to me, but I am afraid that I will die before I see a priest again. Please pray for me." And then there was the nurse. A nurse in a care home in Ireland wrote not on behalf of one resident, but on behalf of all 14 Catholic residents in her ward. She wrote carefully, on plain paper, in the kind of handwriting that suggests someone who chose each word slowly. She wrote, "These people built the church with their lives. Many of them are confused now, or frightened, or very quiet. But when I play hymns in the common room, they sing every word from memory. Every single word. Their bodies have forgotten many things, but they have not forgotten God. They deserve to have someone come to them. They ask me, sometimes some of them ask me if God has forgotten them now that they cannot go to Mass. I do not know what to tell them. Please help me know what to tell them." That letter, it was later reported, was the one the Pope read twice. He set it down. He looked out the window of his study for a long moment, and then he picked up a pen and wrote 3 words in the margin of the letter, 3 words that a Vatican official later shared, carefully, with a journalist who had earned the trust of those close to the Holy Father. The 3 words were, "We must go." The Wednesday general audience arrived, as it always did, with preparation, with security, with the careful choreography of a church that has been welcoming pilgrims to Rome for 2,000 years. Tens of thousands had gathered. Flags from dozens of nations waved in the crowd. The hall hummed with the particular energy of people who had saved and travelled and waited for this moment. But the front rows had been arranged differently that day. By the Pope's personal request, they were filled with elderly pilgrims, many brought by parish groups, some in wheelchairs, some gripping the arms of younger family members who had made the journey possible. Scattered among them were the faces of people for whom being present had cost something real. The physical effort of the journey, the courage the journey required, the simple and extraordinary act of getting here when the world no longer makes getting anywhere easy. Pope Leo the 14th entered the hall. He walked toward the podium, and then he stopped before he reached it. He looked at the front rows. For a long moment, long enough for the crowd to feel it, he simply looked at the faces in front of him. Several of those seated there shifted under the weight of being seen so directly by the man who led the church they had given their lives to. One elderly man in the 3rd row bowed his head. One woman pressed her hands together. The Pope did not take his place at the podium. He carried the microphone with him and walked to the edge of the front section, and he said, without preamble, without the formal opening that audiences customarily begin with, "I want to speak today to the ones who almost did not make it here." The hall went quiet in a different way than halls usually go quiet. He was not speaking about travel delays. He was not speaking about logistics or ticket queues. He was speaking about age. He was speaking about bodies. He was speaking about the fact that every person seated before him had arrived against the odds, and that behind each of them were thousands of others who had watched from a distance because the journey was no longer possible. He said, "I am thinking today about the ones who could not come, the ones who are watching from wherever life has placed them, now from hospital rooms and care homes and the small chairs by windows in places that are kind but are not home. I want them to know that I see them. And more than that, I want them to know that God sees them. The church has not moved on. The church has not finished with them." He paused. Then he said, quietly, "The church is coming to them. Right now, pause for just a moment. Is there someone elderly in your life who is sitting somewhere alone today? A parent, a grandparent, a neighbor whose curtains you have not seen open in a while? Leave their name in the comments below. Just their name. Nothing else is required. Let them be remembered here, by this community, in this moment. We will pray for every name left in those comments. You have our word." What happened in the hours after that address is difficult to capture in any single story. because it happened simultaneously in thousands of places at once. In a care home in Lyon, a staff member described what she witnessed when the Pope began speaking directly to those who could not be present. She said that one of the residents, a woman in her late 80s, who had been largely unresponsive for several weeks, turned her head toward the television and stayed turned toward it for the entire address. In a hospital in northern Italy, a man recovering from surgery watched the address with his rosary in his hand. His daughter sat beside him. She later wrote about the moment in a small online Catholic community, not expecting anyone to read it. She wrote, "My father has not been to Mass in 8 months. Today he watched the Pope's address, and he wept quietly through the whole thing. Afterward, he said to me, 'He knows we are here.' I did not know what to say. I just held his hand." That message was shared and shared again until it had been read by more people than she had ever imagined possible, because it said what so many people had been carrying without a name for it. The Pope was not reconfiguring Vatican departments. He was not proposing a new pastoral commission. He was doing something far more difficult than either of those things. He was saying in the full weight and hearing of the worldwide church that an entire generation of faithful men and women had been outpaced by the speed of modern life, and that this was not acceptable, that it was not what a shepherd does. In the 15th chapter of the Gospel of Luke, Christ told the story of a shepherd who left 99 sheep to search for the one that was lost. One. Not a group, not a statistical subset. One person. Searched for, found, and carried home on the shepherd's shoulders, rejoiced over, Scripture says, more loudly than over the ones who never wandered. The Pope was not reinventing theology. He was being a shepherd. He was counting. And what the world watching understood, whether they were Catholic or not, was that the counting had not stopped, that the one in the care home was still being counted, that the man with the rosary in the hospital bed was still being counted, that the woman watching on the small television by the window was still being counted. Something shifted that day in the understanding of millions of people, and something shifted in the conscience of millions more. Now there is something still left to tell, because what we have described so far is what the cameras caught, what reporters transcribed, what was discussed on Catholic media for days afterward. What we have not yet told you is what Pope Leo the Fourteenth said in the final minutes of that address, what he said when he set down his remaining notes and looked not at the audience in front of him, but at the cameras, as though he knew exactly where the fullness of his flock was gathered. He said, "To the ones watching from care homes and hospital wards, I know you are there. I want you to hear this as clearly as if I were standing in the room with you. You are not on the margins of this church. You are at the center of it. The prayers you pray in the silence of those rooms are not lesser prayers. They may be the holiest prayers being offered anywhere in the world today, prayers born not of comfort but of faithfulness, of choosing to speak to God even when the world around you has grown very quiet." He paused, and then he did something no one in the hall had anticipated. He quoted Scripture not as a professor quotes a text, but the way a father speaks a promise to a child who has forgotten they are loved. He said, "In the book of Isaiah, God speaks these words to his people, and I want you to hear them as spoken directly to you today, in whatever room you are sitting in right now. God says, 'Even to your old age, I am he. Even when your hair is gray, I will carry you. I have made you, and I will bear you, and I will carry you, and I will save you.'" That promise was written 3,000 years ago. It has not expired. It applies to you, in that chair, in that bed, in that room right now, in this moment. The hall was completely still, and then he said the word that no one in that room had expected to hear from a pope in a formal address. He said, "I want to apologize." A murmur moved through the thousands gathered. "I want to apologize on behalf of every moment the church moved too fast and left someone behind. On behalf of every parish where the homebound ministry was treated as optional. On behalf of every Sunday when someone who once sat faithfully in that pew was not visited, not called, not communicated with, not out of cruelty, but out of distraction. We allowed speed to replace attention. We allowed progress to cost us presence. I am sorry, and I am telling you today, this must change. Not as a program, not as a campaign, as a conversion. We must learn to stop. We must learn to go. We must carry the church to the ones the church has not yet reached. There are moments in the history of the church when something shifts, not in the documents, not in the councils, but in the air itself. This was one of those moments, because the Pope was not only speaking to the elderly in care homes, he was speaking to every person watching who had a grandmother in a care home they had not visited since Christmas, to every son or daughter who told themselves they would call this weekend and didn't, to every grandchild whose great-grandmother still lights a candle for them at daily mass if she can still get there, and who has not called to say thank you, to every member of a parish who has noticed an empty pew and moved on without asking where the person went. He was holding a mirror up to an enormous room, and the room could feel the weight of what it reflected. Let us be honest with each other for a moment. There is someone watching this right now who has not called their mother in 2 weeks, or 3, or longer than that, and the discomfort of that truth is sitting somewhere just behind the chest right now, quiet and persistent. There is someone watching this who has a grandparent in a care home, a good care home, a clean place, a kind staff, and the last visit was 3 months ago, maybe 4, and she has not asked when you are coming back, because she does not want to be a burden, because she has spent her entire life refusing to be a burden, because that is what her generation was taught and what her generation believed and what her generation still, quietly, lives by. She prays for you by name every single day. That has not changed. Her world has grown smaller. Her body has grown slow. But the prayer she sends up for you in the early morning before the ward begins its noise, before the day begins its business, that prayer has not shortened by a single word. The psalmist prayed 3,000 years ago in the 71st Psalm, "Do not cast me away when I am old. Do not forsake me when my strength is gone." He was speaking to God. But God, who has always worked through human hands, answers that prayer through the people who pick up the phone, who walk through the care home door, who pull a chair close and stay long enough for the visit to feel like something other than an obligation. The Pope's message was not a lecture about aging policy. It was not a Vatican initiative or a pastoral guideline. It was a shepherd speaking plainly to his flock, saying, "Go back for the one. Go back for the one you left behind without meaning to. Go back before it is too late to go back." That question, "Who will go?" was not rhetorical. It was directed at every person watching a screen anywhere in the world that afternoon. At you. It might take 20 minutes, a phone call, a short drive on a Saturday morning, a letter written by hand, the way the elderly taught us to write, before the world went digital and fast and forgetful of the things that cannot be sent in a notification. It might be the most important thing you do this week. Helene did not know about the full address until her daughter called that evening. Her daughter, who had watched a clip of it during her lunch break and cried in a way that surprised her, called and read the Pope's words aloud, slowly. The Isaiah passage, the apology, the promise. Helene listened without speaking. When her daughter finished, there was a long silence on the line. Then Helene said, "Read me the Isaiah part again." Her daughter read it again. "Even to your old age, I am he. Even when your hair is grey, I will carry you." Another silence. Then Helene said, "I have always known that, but it is good to be reminded." Her daughter asked if she was all right. Helene said, "I am better than I have been in a long time." Her daughter visited the following Saturday. She brought food, and she stayed for 4 hours. She sat in the chair across from the window where the roses were still open in the courtyard. And they talked about things they had not talked about in years. Helene's husband, the small country church where they were married, the way the winter light used to come through the rose window on Sunday mornings when the children were small and the world was whole and God seemed very close and very simple. Her daughter said it was one of the best afternoons of her adult life. She said she did not know why she had waited so long. She said she did not have a good answer to that question. But she said she would not wait again. There is a kind of forgetting that does not feel like forgetting while it is happening. Life moves. Weeks become months. Good intentions stay good intentions. And somewhere in a room you can picture, if you close your eyes right now, someone you love is counting the days between visits the way a person in a desert counts the miles to water. Not because they are dramatic, not because they are ungrateful, because the human heart was made for presence, and presence cannot be replaced by intention. The elderly do not ask for much. They have lived long enough to know that asking changes very little. They wait. They pray. They hold the faith that younger hands set down, saying, "I am too busy for this right now," and they keep it warm for the day when those same hands will reach for it again. They are not dead weight in the body of Christ. They are the memory of the body. They are the living archive of what it cost to build what we have inherited. They sat in those pews through the hard decades, through grief, through loss, through the long, dark midnights when doubt pressed against the door, and they held it shut with nothing but prayer and stubbornness, and a love for God that was older and quieter and stronger than any difficulty. They are not a ministry project. They are not a pastoral demographic. In the 25th chapter of Matthew's Gospel, Christ said, "I was sick, and you visited me. I was alone, and you came to me." And those who asked when they had done this or failed to do it were told something that has echoed through 2,000 years of Christian conscience. Whatever you did or did not do, for the least of my brothers and sisters, you did it, or you did not do it, to me. The elderly woman in the care home with the worn rosary and the photograph of her wedding day on the bedside table, the man who has not received communion in 7 months, the grandmother whose grandchildren she prays for by name every morning, even though none of them have called in weeks. They are Christ. And the question Pope Leo the 14th asked gently, as a shepherd asks, not as a judge condemns, was simply this: will you go to him? Will you stop what you are doing today, not eventually, today, and go? If this story landed in your heart today, if a face came to your mind while you were watching, someone you have been meaning to call, someone you have been meaning to visit, do not let that feeling pass without acting on it. Make the call today. Drive there this weekend. Write the letter by hand, the way they taught you. Sit in the chair. Stay long enough for the visit to become a memory they will carry. Then, come back and tell us in the comments that you did. Tell us the name of the person you reached out to. Tell us where in the world you are watching from. Tell us what this story stirred up in you. And if you believe these stories matter, stories that bring people back to their faith, back to each other, back to God, subscribe to this channel right now. Like this video so that more people can find it. Share it with someone who has an elderly parent or grandparent who deserves to be remembered today. Share it with a parish community. Share it with a friend who needs to hear what this Pope said. Every share is a prayer delivered. Every name left in those comments is a soul remembered. Every visit made because of a story like this one is the Church doing what it was always meant to do, not waiting for the lost to find their way back, but going out to meet them exactly where they are. We are all part of the same flock. The shepherd is still counting. No one is too far gone to be found. God bless you. Now, go make that call.